Want to stay up to date with everything that's happening on the show? Or do you have a story that you'd like to submit for one of our Listener Stories episodes? You can get in touch with the show via the website at www.hauntedukpodcast.com, on Instagram at hauntedukpodcast, on X at hauntedukpod, or you can email us at contactus@hauntedukpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and TikTok. And if you want to support the show, you can do it via either Patreon or Ko-fi. Both platforms have exactly the same content, but work in slightly different ways. One of the advantages of Patreon is its sleek user interface. But if you want to avoid those pesky additional charges that Apple, Google, and Patreon apply to your subscription, then why not give Ko-fi a try? Simply open a browser window and type ko-fi/HauntedUKPodcast, and you'll soon find us. Whichever platform you choose, we're sure you'll enjoy the bonus content. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the episode.
I'm Rob Kirkup, and I am the host of How Haunted, the podcast where we explore the dark history and terrifying ghost stories of some of the UK's most haunted places, with the occasional trip overseas. Every other Friday, you'll hear tales of horror, chilling investigations with real audio from ghost hunts, and even the occasional guest, or poltergeist, as I prefer to call them. Every October, we go weekly for spooky season, with a month of themed episodes building up to a huge Halloween spooktacular. And at Christmas, I share your own real-life ghost stories in the Nightmare Before Christmas special. So search for How Haunted wherever you get your podcasts, and join me every fortnight as we ask the question, how haunted?
He returned to his bedroom and went to close the door, but strangely felt resistance, as if someone or something was leaning against it. Finally managing to close the door, making sure it was firmly shut, he continued to read for a while until growing tired and deciding to go to bed. But his sleep was soon disturbed when he was woken up to the bedroom door handle rattling and shaking. He then watched it turning both clockwise and anti-clockwise. This is episode 61 of the Haunted UK podcast, and in this episode we're going on a trip to one of the most haunted castles in the UK, Muncaster Castle. We often think of castles as ruins, mystical places where kings, queens and knights resided hundreds of years ago. Visions are conjured up in our childhood of figures such as King Arthur, the sword Excalibur and the castle of Camelot, where the Knights of the Round Table would solemnly congregate. Yet there is still a surprising number of these historically significant buildings which are still being lived in by distant relatives of those who built them, or families who took over the properties years ago, saving them from possible ruin. Companies such as Merlin Entertainments, who own Warwick Castle, have helped save many of these beautiful buildings, turning them into tourist attractions, hotels, wedding venues. The sheer importance and history that these once powerful fortresses still contain goes back hundreds and sometimes over 1,000 years. It's sometimes difficult to get a grasp of the fact that these buildings have seen so many wars over the years, amounting to the deaths of thousands and thousands of soldiers. Then let's not forget those everyday citizens that died, the plagues, diseases that ravaged the United Kingdom, the kings, queens and other members of royalty who were executed, and all of those who they executed. All of this traumatic history is wrapped like ivy tendrils around the masonry of the very walls of these castles, and seeped into the stone are blood and memories and tales never told. So it's no surprise to hear that they are haunted by the spirits of several people who have been long since gone for hundreds of years. So in this episode, we'll be taking a look into the hauntings and strange goings-on in a castle which has a formidable reputation. If you travel to Cumbria and the Lake District, approximately a mile from the west coast, but right by the River Esk, you'll find Muncaster Castle, a privately owned residence lived in by the same family for around 800 years. The Pennington family have records of their ancestors living in Muncaster as far back as 1208, but the foundation on which their house sits upon goes all the way back to the Roman era. The castle has been remodeled and added to over the years, but it was the 5th Baron Muncaster who oversaw extensive renovations to both the building and the grounds. He planted many of the trees on the estate and worked alongside renowned architect Anthony Salvin to convert the courtyard into the present-day drawing room. This is an especially spectacular room, as it has an arched ceiling with incredibly intricate plasterwork, which was completed by two extremely talented Italian plasterers in the 1800s. The grounds of Muncaster are also very impressive, taking full advantage of the view of the River Esk and the mountains of the surrounding Lake District. At present, Muncaster Castle is owned by Peter and Iona Frost Pennington and has been open to the public for some years. It also hosts a variety of events, festivals, markets, outdoor theatrical productions, concerts, sporting events, and even immersive experiences with medieval weapons, as well as its own Hawk and Owl Centre, which is nestled within the grounds. You can even stay in the grounds of the castle in a number of different types of accommodation. But what about ghosts? What about entities? Hauntings? Well, Muncaster is reportedly one of the most haunted castles in the whole of the UK. And if you're brave enough, you can pay to stay overnight in the Tapestry Room. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here, and for goodness sake, let's not enter the Tapestry Room just yet. We'll keep that for later. You won't be disappointed. Instead, let's dive into some of the creepy and strange experiences which have been reported in this beautiful building. The Pennington family have had their fair share of strange experiences over the years, and even the previous owner of the castle, Patrick Gordon Duff Pennington, who died in 2021, recorded a number of incidents which happened to him. One particular area of the castle that disturbed him the most was the corridor between the back door and his personal office. Always at night, if Patrick was in that part of the castle, he'd hear very clear footsteps following him. Even his dogs didn't like being there and would regularly try to beat a hasty retreat to another area of the building. Alan Clark was the horticulturalist at Muncaster Castle and ran Muncaster's Plant Centre. He was made curator of the castle by the wife of Patrick Gordon Duff Pennington, Lady Phillida Gordon Duff Pennington. Quite often, he would stay over at the castle, and it was on one of these nights that he had a couple of very disturbing experiences. Quietly sitting and reading a book in the bedroom he was staying in, his attention was suddenly drawn to the bedroom door, as the handle was physically turned, and the door pushed open. Fully expecting someone to walk in, Alan sat in his chair waiting, but nobody came through the door. He got up to check to see if there was someone outside the bedroom door waiting, but there was no sign of anyone. He returned to his bedroom and went to close the door, but strangely felt resistance, as if someone or something was leaning against it. Finally managing to close the door, making sure it was firmly shut, he continued to read for a while until growing tired and deciding to go to bed. But his sleep was soon disturbed when he was woken up to the bedroom door handle rattling and shaking. Then he watched it turning both clockwise and anti-clockwise. Getting out of bed and quickly opening the door, he was met by the sight of an empty corridor and a very quiet castle. Alan Clark never found a satisfactory explanation for his experiences inside Muncaster, but there are quite a few candidates for the culprit. One person in particular stands out more than others, and he's been dead for hundreds of years. Thomas Skelton. Thomas Skelton was employed as the last ever jester to the Pennington family around the mid to late 1500s to the mid 1600s. There are a number of dates quoted as to when Skelton was born and when he died, so it's difficult to pin him down to an exact time in history. But with that said, he was a real person, and you can see what he looked like if you visit Muncaster Castle, because his portrait hangs in a corridor that is said to be very haunted. But before we get to that, I think Thomas Skelton needs a proper introduction. He was not only a trickster, but was also a very ruthless and cruel man who enjoyed to revel in the pain and misfortune of others. This sadistic enjoyment was shared by his masters, the Penningtons, who made him a steward of their estate. Another title which a jester was known by in those days was a fool, and Skelton was known as Tom Fool, which is where the saying tomfoolery comes from. Horrifyingly, Skelton was responsible for a number of deaths, but to give an accurate number is impossible. He would play devious and sometimes fatal tricks on completely innocent people. One of his favorite pastimes was sitting underneath the shade of a large chestnut tree outside Muncaster and waiting for passers-by. If he liked the look of them, Skelton would make conversation and direct them to wherever they needed to go. However, if he didn't like the look of them, he would send them in the direction of a patch of quicksand, and to their doom. It wasn't just strangers who would find themselves on the wrong side of Skelton's murderous tendencies. It was said that he viciously bludgeoned a carpenter to death, decapitating him in the process as an act of revenge. His master at the time, Sir William Pennington, was having difficulty controlling his daughter Hellwise. She'd taken up a relationship with the local carpenter. Her father didn't approve at all, and he was determined to do something about it. He enlisted Tom Skelton to take care of the matter, which he did, murdering the poor man in cold blood. Skelton invited the carpenter to the castle, telling him that he could meet Hellwise in safety, but as soon as he got there, Skelton began offering him cider, and before too long, the carpenter was completely drunk and unable to even stand up. Skelton then took advantage of the situation and grabbed a chisel and mallet from the carpenter's tool bag, beat him unconscious, and then hacked off his head. He allegedly presented it to Sir William as a morbid type of souvenir. There are many reports of dull thuds being heard, coming from the staircase, with no sign of anyone or anything around to make the sounds. It's been suggested that these thuds are the sounds of the carpenter's headless body being dragged down the stairs. Many witnesses have also said that the sounds of a woman sobbing can be heard at the same time, and these have been attributed to Hellwise Pennington, grieving for her lost love. She spent the rest of her life in a nunnery, returning after her death to haunt the rooms and corridors of Muncaster. Even today, Skelton's influence and aura still fills the castle, leaving both the Pennington family and many of the staff members feeling that he still roams the castle, playing tricks and dishing out the odd scare or two. But even Skelton couldn't escape a terrible death. He drowned in the River Esk, just a short distance away from the castle, which he called home, and the site of many of his horrific crimes. So now we've finally arrived at the Tapestry Room. Raise your hackles, draw your defenses in, because the Tapestry Room is said to be one of the most paranormally active spaces in the castle. But like many other haunted locations around the country, and the world in fact, the spirits don't always want to come out to play. We've mentioned this on the show many times before, but could this be a case of the lack of, or indeed the existence of, a type of sensitivity needed to see and feel these types of phenomena? Not everyone will see a ghost in their lifetime, neither will they experience any form of paranormal or supernatural activity, whereas others will, and do. This seesaw of those who have experiences with those who don't is never more prevalent than at Muncaster, and the Tapestry Room is the ideal setting to witness this in action. There are so many examples of entire groups who have spent the night in the Tapestry Room with mixed results. People standing or sitting next to each other have been known to report wildly differing opinions of what they have seen. But let's concentrate on those who have seen or experienced something. Dr. Jason Braithwaite is somewhat of an expert when it comes to paranormal occurrences which have taken place at Muncaster. Being somewhat of a local, having grown up in the western area of the Lake District, Braithwaite has a deep attachment to the area as a whole, and has a direct connection to Muncaster itself, because his grandfather, Jack Braithwaite, worked there all of his life as a stonemason. But Braithwaite also has the credentials to back up his expertise when it comes to his work at Muncaster. A BSc Honours degree in psychology from Lancaster University, as well as a PhD in cognitive neuroscience from the Behavioural Brain Science Centre School of Psychology, University of Birmingham. These are just a couple of the impressive qualifications which Braithwaite brings to the table. Since the days of him being a youngster in the area, and with his family being friends with the Penningtons of Muncaster, he'd heard many of the stories about the ghosts which roamed the castle and its grounds, but he wanted to know more. Since the days of his grandfather working at the estate, many things had changed, including a new generation of Penningtons. So it wouldn't necessarily be as easy as just knocking on the door and asking for permission to conduct field research and experiments. Braithwaite felt that he had to put the work in before making contact with the family, so he set about researching those who'd had first-hand eyewitness accounts of activity at Muncaster, then went on to gathering up the second-hand stories too, those who had passed away but had accounted their experiences to others. Once all of this information had been gathered, catalogued and collated into an organised research archive, Braithwaite decided it was time to contact the family. To their credit, the current owners of the castle, then and now, Peter and Iona Frost Pennington, were completely on board with the scientific study of the various forms of paranormal phenomena, which had been so often reported. This is something that isn't seen very often in cases of haunted houses, whether they are small residential homes or large sprawling family estates such as Muncaster. It seems at times that many of these properties tend to welcome the more entertainment-based media shows through their doors. Now, whilst there's nothing wrong with that, it can give the impression that the more scientific-based research has been overlooked. Officially, Braithwaite's investigations and experiments began way back in 1992, with the family fully backing his approach and giving him permission to interview not only themselves, but also the staff members who worked there. Braithwaite and the Pennington family have a unique agreement when it comes to the research conducted at Muncaster, with media attention and approaches from television production companies strictly regulated. According to Dr. Braithwaite, this has benefited both the research and findings, instead of having the waters of a more scientific and controlled investigation muddied. So what has this research and investigation revealed? Well, one thing that really stands out are the readings from various instruments which were set up in the Tapestry Room, and in particular, around the bed that has been responsible for so many strange reports of unexplained activity. But could an explanation now be within the grasp of the researchers? Very strange activity has been observed and recorded in this location, with the apparent existence of a significantly higher than normal magnetic field. This field is so present that it can even move the needle of a compass more than 90 degrees, from up to 2 meters away. An instrument called MADS, which stands for Magnetic Anomaly Detection System, which was actually designed by Dr. Braithwaite, was also deployed to give a more in-depth analysis of this very real phenomenon. Specifically, the researchers were looking for signs of EIFs, or experience-inducing fields. These are types of magnetic fields that have been observed under strict scientific conditions to be able to induce phenomena such as hallucinations. MADS was used on numerous separate occasions to successfully detect what seems like an EIF, which is very present on and around the bed. Mains power supply artifacts were also observed as a possibility of the magnetic phenomena. Mains power emits a magnetic field with a 50 Hz wave, and whilst this is too high a frequency to be considered an EIF, this wave began to display strange characteristics. This 50 Hz wave would dip dramatically down to around 0.125 Hz, which is extremely low, every 8 seconds. This isn't far away from qualifying as an EIF. Possible explanations for the appearance of this wave could be down to electrical items being switched on and off, or some sort of electrical device operating at a different phase than that of the 3-phase power supply which is installed in the castle. But what about situations where there isn't any interference from electrical appliances or power supplies? Well, these static magnetic fields were also observed on and around the bed, particularly in the area of the pillow, right where your head would be if you were spending the night there. So it's quite possible that even in the days before the luxury of an electrical supply, experience-inducing fields could be generated. But whilst this research and the results has been a huge step forward in the investigation of possible causes of paranormal activity, does it explain everything? The bed itself is quite unusual because the iron mesh which supports the mattress can influence and distort magnetic fields, furthering the argument that anyone sleeping on that bed could have an experience which could result in, say, the sighting of an apparition, the sense of being watched, or even the sensation of hearing voices. So let's hear a few examples of the phenomenon which has been witnessed in this very strange room of the castle. In 2007, a group of 8 people who worked at the same health club decided to take part in a ghost sit for the charity Children in Need. According to all involved, the evening got off to a great start, with them walking around the castle gardens in the dark, having a collection of spooky stories told to them as they were led around. After a while, their guide took them to the Tapestry Room, where they would be spending the night. Out of the 8 people involved in the ghost sit, 7 said they experienced strange phenomena. One in the group reported getting a severe headache as soon as he entered the room, and then uncontrollably bursting into tears. As the evening went on, he recorded several, not only audio events, but visual ones too. He then became aware of the sensation that something was watching him, and this feeling became so strong that at 4 a.m. he could no longer cope with this dark and oppressive atmosphere and decided to leave the room and not return. Another member of the group heard the sound of crying, which actually woke them up. They then witnessed a glowing light in the corner of the room. Oddly, it was as if this light had some sort of influence over the members of the group, acting like a magnet in the corner, inducing a few of them to suddenly wake up and then, as if in a trance, weep helplessly, and even more unnerving, some of them woke up and began screaming, as if their life depended on it. In the morning, it was reported that 2 others also heard sobbing throughout the night. At around 3:45 a.m., one of the group members was woken up by their friend, who swore that she'd been hearing the sound of a child crying. Both women tried their best not to fall asleep again. They wanted to see if the phenomenon would repeat itself, and around 15 minutes later, it did. By then, the time was around 4 a.m., the same time that one of the male guests could no longer stay in the room. Almost straight after hearing the crying for the second time, one of the women also burst into tears, completely unable to explain why. The crying was also corroborated by a third woman who didn't mention anything until after the vigil was over. Around a week before this ghost sit, another took place which was attended to by 4 female friends: Leslie, Emma, Sharon and Tracy. This stay at Muncaster Castle also proved to be a very active one. Upon entering the Tapestry Room, Emma was immediately struck by a strong feeling of nausea, which would only disappear when she left the room. As soon as she returned, the sickness would return. It was strange. She also reported hearing crying, but this was only for a very short time. Yet she was aware of a very cold breeze which was present for most of the night. Tracy also felt similar sensations, but hers were more connected to the bed itself. She said when she did try to sleep on the bed, she was constantly disturbed by the sensations of cold spots, which seemed to be focused on the right side of her face. She also became breathless and said that her head began to feel fuzzy, followed by a general feeling of being unwell. Tracy also heard the crying of a child and even reported the sighting of a shadowy figure making its way up the corridor towards the portrait of Tom Skelton. There was even a brief moment of poltergeist activity when the bedroom door slammed shut. This was also corroborated by 3 of the group, while the 4th was in the toilet, nowhere near the Tapestry Room. Sharon also felt the many cold spots during the evening, noticing that the whole atmosphere in the room seemed to be, well, cold. She also heard noises throughout the experience, but couldn't be sure of what they were, what was making them, and where they were coming from. These types of occurrences seem to be quite a regular thing at Muncaster, and it's not just the ghost hunters who have experiences. Clifford Jones is a very well-respected archaeologist whose speciality is in the discovery of Roman settlements. He's been a vocal supporter for the preservation of these amazing sites for decades, and he's worked at many locations around the UK. But it was a discovery at Muncaster Castle that set the wheels in motion for his own experience. Jones's discoveries in Cumbria have been incredibly important in verifying that the Roman Empire was much more prominent there than first thought, and at Muncaster he'd found evidence of a large settlement. As previously stated earlier in this episode, there has been a dwelling of some sorts for around 800 years, but there's also evidence that parts of the castle itself were built upon old Roman foundations dating back to around 79 AD. After a busy day at the castle, Jones retired to his room in the castle towers and began to relax. After a while, he began to hear what sounded like somebody chopping wood. Very odd, he thought, as he was the only person staying in the castle, apart from one of the family members who was staying in a different part of the building. Curious as to who could be chopping wood at this hour, Jones left his room and went downstairs, a decision which would signal a night of terror. Every single step he took, the sound continued, even as he opened the door to the courtyard, and found nobody there. Not knowing what to do, Clifford Jones spoke out of the emptiness of the courtyard. "Please stop the noise," he asked, and in some sort of strange and creepy validation of his request, whatever was making the noise stopped. Now quite nervous, Clifford retreated back into the tower and quickly made his way upstairs, but his night in the company of something strange wasn't over just yet. He opened the door to the toilet and switched on the light, and the bulb blew out. He backed out onto the landing, and that bulb blew out too. Getting more and more creeped out, he then went into the lounge, and unbelievably, the bulbs blew out in there too. As soon as the morning light began streaming through the windows of the castle, Clifford Jones packed up his clothes and left the property for around 3 days, too nervous to stay there. Speaking about the event, he said, quote, "I can't account for it. Muncaster is a magical place with so many different layers of history. Who am I to refute what's happened? I have no explanation for what happened to me." End quote. So is it possible that Clifford Jones and his team unearthed more than just the Roman artifacts which they discovered? Is it plausible to hypothesize that by moving, disturbing the ground, and maybe removing items from a moment in time long since gone, that something was unleashed, released into our world? The owners of the castle, the Penningtons, are keeping their minds open to the prospect of another ghost calling Muncaster home. So, what about the other ghosts who roam the castle and its grounds? Are there stories from witnesses who've encountered them? You guessed it. Yes. So, let's first of all go way back to 1805 and the house of the local pastor. A young woman by the name of Mary Bragg had been the housekeeper for the pastor for a while, but it wasn't her job which drew her interest. It was the person who she was in love with, John Pike. Mary had been in a relationship with Pike, who was the house steward of Lord Muncaster, but in the background, there was also someone else who had their eyes firmly on him, and if she couldn't have him, then Mary certainly couldn't. The other woman in question was allegedly a housemaid by the name of Miss Littledale, who also worked at the castle, and being incredibly jealous of Mary and John Pike's relationship, she decided to do something about it. Again, there are differing opinions as to who was involved and what exactly happened next, but from comparing a number of sources, this is what I feel was most likely the scenario. Late one evening, Mary was taking care of her chores at the pastor's house when there was a knock at the door. At the time, the pastor wasn't home, so it was just Mary alone in the house. Another series of knocks rang out. So Mary stopped what she was doing and went to answer the door. Stood in the darkness were 2 men who asked if she was Mary Bragg.
"Are you Mary Bragg?"
Yes. Can I help you?
The men then explained that they'd been sent by her lover, John Pike, who was gravely ill and wasn't expected to make it through the following day. She was to travel with them immediately to see him on his deathbed. This was obviously a complete lie, and unbeknownst to her, Mary Bragg was walking straight into a trap, a very deadly one. As she was escorted to the coach and horses waiting to take her to Muncaster, she noticed that the horses' hooves had been covered to dampen their noise. This was very unusual, but it didn't register that there was anything off with the situation. As the coach got closer and closer to the castle, it came to a stop, and both men went either side of the carriage and dragged Mary out and into the woods. She was brutally murdered, and some say she was hung from a tree just outside the castle. Her body was then dumped in some undergrowth, the 2 men confident that it wouldn't be found. But the day after the murder took place, a local young farm worker stumbled upon Mary's body. The boy alerted the gamekeeper at Muncaster Castle, simply because the body was literally in the woods outside the grounds, and he followed the boy back to where he'd found Mary. Her body was then taken back to the castle and stored in an outbuilding, and this news would have definitely made its way into the castle, possibly alerting the housemaid who'd engineered the plot to have Mary Bragg killed. The authorities became aware of the murder, and it was only a matter of time before they would descend on the castle, asking some very awkward questions. When the authorities and the coroner finally arrived a few days later, the body had mysteriously disappeared, and with no body, the authorities didn't have any evidence. A few weeks later, a body was found floating in the River Esk, which runs past the castle grounds. It was the body of Mary Bragg. Mary was finally taken to the coroner, but because of the amount of time that she'd been in the water, as well as the mutilation which had taken place due to eels feeding on her corpse. No cause of death could be determined. After Mary's burial, strange things began occurring. Both men who'd carried out the murder were caught committing different crimes. One was hanged in London, guilty of being a highway robber, and the other died in prison, slowly descending into madness. Coachmen who would use the road outside the castle to ferry people to their destinations began seeing the figure of a woman wearing a long white dress, roaming the grounds of the castle and the woodland opposite. This figure would even walk straight out in front of the coaches and then mysteriously disappear. This has continued to happen to this very day. Accounts going all the way back to the year of Mary's death in 1805 tell of a ghostly woman in white stepping out in front of travelling vehicles, with multiple witnesses reporting the same thing. Drivers and passengers in cars have stated that they were positive they'd struck a woman in a long white dress, only to pull over and find nobody there. Even the tree which Mary was hung from began to gain the reputation of being cursed. Because it grew alongside the main road outside the castle, it needed regular trimming to enable drivers to see down the road safely. But no one would take the job on, so in a desperate measure, the Penningtons finally found a tree surgeon from out of town who'd be willing to travel to the site and deal with the tree. After the tree surgeon had tied off numerous ropes to enable him to climb to the top to begin cutting, he got into position with his chainsaw poised and ready. News spread, and some locals gathered to see the cursed tree finally being cut down, felled, and disposed of. But things didn't start off well. Unbeknownst to the tree surgeon, an animal believed to have been a bat was resting, right in the spot where he was about to begin cutting with the chainsaw. This obviously resulted in a spray of blood, which not only peppered the tree surgeon, but also the surrounding branches and leaves. All of this was being watched by the curious onlookers below. Whatever actually happened up in the tree didn't alter the opinions of the locals. The tree was cursed, and nobody was going to buy any of the wood from it. In the end, it was reported that the lumber had been shipped out of the country. Jonathan Stanley, who was the hospitality manager of Muncaster in 2002, also had a strange experience with an apparition outside in the castle gardens. It was around 11:30 a.m. on the 27th of July, and it was a beautiful sunny day. Jonathan remembers walking outside along the terrace when suddenly he was gripped by a very strange and alarming vision. Describing the sensation as, quote, "if I had eyes in the back of my head," end quote, Jonathan saw the figure of a person dressed in black, but very tall and very thin. This figure was also wearing black boots, a detail which Jonathan clearly remembers. Whatever or whoever this figure was, the vision was strong enough to stop Jonathan in his tracks, even causing him to turn around, fully expecting to be met with the sight of an eerie, dark apparition. But again, just like the previous stories, there was nothing there. He felt that the figure had been walking near the yew hedge, which was close by, but it wasn't radiating a feeling of dread or fear. Jonathan felt more intrigued than scared. Later that same year in September, Peter Frost Pennington had just finished taking a ghost tour around the gardens and the castle when he felt the need to retreat to the kitchen of his living quarters for a late-night snack. As he rummaged around trying to find something that took his fancy, he noticed that out of the corner of his eye, the light which illuminated the front door flickered, as if somebody had just walked past it, but upon inspection, there was nobody there. Strange, he thought, but then things got even weirder when he clearly heard the sound of a dog barking. This was definitely not Peter's dog, Esk, as she only barked when she heard other dogs. Curious to find out if there was now a dog outside, he made his way back to the front door and witnessed the light not just flickering now, but flashing on and off. It then stayed on, but by this time Peter had had enough, so went back into the kitchen to read the newspaper. After a little while, Peter decided to get some sleep, so turned the kitchen light off and made his way to bed, passing the front door again, and the light was now off, but the switch was still on. Stopping and taking another look outside but seeing nothing, Peter flicked the switch off, then back on, and the light instantly came back on. The switch was tried a number of times, and every time it did exactly what it was made to do: turn the light on and off. After a few hours' sleep, Peter tried the light switch again, and it was working perfectly well. Going back to the Tapestry Room, apart from the strange magnetic fields which seem to be concentrated around the four-poster bed, there's another strange phenomenon which many witnesses have experienced: the sounds of a crying baby or young child. One person who decided to take his experience to the next level by delving into the castle's history was James Cartland. While staying the night in the Tapestry Room and sleeping in the bed, he began to hear the sound of a young child crying. Looking around the room trying to pinpoint where the sound was coming from, his focus fell on the chimney. Already alarmed by the fact that he was hearing the sound of a child crying, when he was the only person in that area of the castle, he was struck by further terror when it seemed that another spirit had decided to join the crying child, a male. He then began to hear the disembodied voice of this man as he tried to calm the child down. "Shh, shh, all is well, all is well, shh, shh." Completely confused by this creepy phenomenon, Cartland got out of bed and opened the bedroom door, just to make sure that there wasn't anyone in the corridor messing around. The dimly lit corridor was completely silent and empty, but upon returning back to the bedroom, Cartland said that the voices seemed to increase in volume. "Shh, shh, all is well, all is well, shh, shh," to the point where he actually thought they were in the room with him. Needless to say, Cartland didn't sleep that night and admitted to the Penningtons that he stayed awake for the remaining hours until daylight began to pour into the room. But it did prompt him to begin to look deeper into the history of the castle, and also to the possible identities of the man and child. Cartland began his research by finding out that the Tapestry Room had in fact been a child's nursery in the 1800s, and it was from here that quite a sad story emerged regarding a past member of the Pennington family. Margaret Susan Elizabeth Pennington was born in 1860 to parents Gamel Augustus Pennington, the 4th Baron of Muncaster, and Lady Jane Grosvenor, daughter of Richard Grosvenor, the 2nd Marquis of Westminster. Margaret was a very sickly child with numerous health issues, and she sadly passed away aged just 11 years old on the 8th of July, 1871. So many witnesses have come forward stating that they too have heard the distinct sounds of a young child crying, but also the disembodied voice of a man or a woman trying to calm their child. Some have even heard the woman singing soft lullabies, which they felt was even more disturbing and frightening than the crying itself. It is the belief of many that the crying child is Margaret Susan Elizabeth Pennington, and the calming voice, well, that is equally believed to be either her mother, Lady Jane Grosvenor, or her father, Gamel Augustus Pennington. These incidents and many others sparked the interest of the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena, or ASAP for short. In 1995, a team from ASAP were at Muncaster to conduct a thorough investigation, and during one evening, the team experienced a series of very strange and unexplained events. The plan was to separate into smaller teams and go to assigned locations around the castle. Each team would then spend around 45 to 60 minutes in their location, then take a break, then rotate to another area of the castle. Researchers Ian and Daniel had been assigned to the Tapestry Room, completely unaware of what was happening just outside. Paranormal investigator Melanie Warren was concentrating on her clipboard, which had her notes attached regarding the evening's investigation so far. As she got to the main staircase and began to climb, she noticed the legs of another person ahead of her. Not taking too much notice, she saw the person walk into one of the bedrooms which the group were using as a break room. This was where coffee was being served, but the legs suddenly changed direction and went into the Tapestry Room. Meanwhile, Ian and Daniel were still sat inside the Tapestry Room, and Ian began to get a feeling that even though their shift in that location was almost at an end, they should hold on. Ian described this feeling as a mild type of headache, and as this feeling began to gain momentum, a black shadowy figure entered the Tapestry Room, walking straight through the half-open door, and began moving straight towards Ian. He sat there in stunned silence as the figure passed directly through him and through the wall behind him. For a brief moment, Ian said that his vision had a strange blue haze to it as the figure passed through him. Almost immediately after this happened, Melanie Warren stepped into the Tapestry Room, looking for the person who was ahead of her on the stairs, who had walked into the room where Ian and Daniel were. She looked at both men and asked who just entered the room a few seconds ago. Both Ian and Melanie shared what they had both separately experienced. Strangely though, Daniel didn't see any figure whatsoever. But he could have been looking in the direction of something else. However, two witnesses did, and both of them were in different places. It became apparent that a number of researchers had seen the figure as it made its way to the Tapestry Room, followed by Melanie, and seen by Ian, but it was never witnessed by more than one person at the same time. The figure was considered by researchers to have shown no sign of intelligence, and as Ian relayed his encounter to his colleagues, he was said to have a look of complete terror on his face. But going back to the question of intelligence, surely it could be argued that whatever this apparition was, it knew its way around the castle, could somehow make itself visible to some people but not to others, unless that comes down to the question of individual susceptibility. Anyway, what's more, this figure knew where the stairs, corridors and doors were, and seemingly navigated all of them with ease. Could this be considered as some form of intelligence? Whatever we think of this, it doesn't take away from the fact that this sighting was incredibly intriguing. Another very interesting story revolves around King Henry VI. On the 15th of May 1464, Henry tasted defeat at the Battle of Hexham at the hands of Edward IV, but escaped after being captured and went into hiding. Managing to get to the cover of the Lake District, many sympathizers helped Henry with food and shelter for almost a year, until he found safety at Muncaster Castle. He was sent on his way to Muncaster by shepherds who'd found him taking shelter under a large tree from the rain. Sir John Pennington welcomed Henry, gave him a safe place to stay, and in return, when Henry left, he gave Sir John a parting gift, a beautiful Venetian glass bowl, but this gift came with two conditions. The first was that it had to stay inside the castle, and the second was that under no circumstances was the bowl to be broken. By sticking to these conditions, Henry assured Sir John that the Pennington family would thrive, would have good fortune and much luck. And he wasn't wrong. It has been said that King Henry's ghost wanders around the corridors and rooms of Muncaster Castle. Maybe he returned to Muncaster because of the kindness he was shown by the Pennington family. Or maybe he's watching over that Venetian glass bowl because it still exists today, still in one piece, and still on display at Muncaster Castle. It is known as the Luck of Muncaster. Just over 300 years after Henry gifted the bowl to Sir John Pennington, a stone tower was built at the location where the shepherds first discovered King Henry. Called the Chapel, just like the Luck of Muncaster, it still stands even today. Moving away from the castle for a moment, we find ourselves at the coachman's quarters, a self-catering accommodation block built into the old stable building. This is located quite close to the Hawk and Owl Centre, where highly trained handlers fly a variety of beautiful birds of prey. I've personally attended a show, and I found not only the talk given by the handlers incredibly interesting, but also the experience of having these amazing birds literally brushing their wings over the top of your head as they fly over you. Absolutely incredible. In 2002, Elaine Filota was staying at the coachman's quarters in room 7. She was with a group of friends who were also staying at Muncaster that night, but they were in separate rooms. After drifting off to sleep, she was woken up by the noise of what sounded like the lid of a teapot being closed. Over and over again. She noted the time as being 2:25 a.m. The noise appeared to be coming from the hallway, so nervously, Elaine got out of bed to use the toilet and to check if anything was out of place. She found nothing, so returned back to bed and lay there in the darkness. Maybe it was the birds, she thought. The noise then changed from the sound of a teapot lid closing to a clanking metallic dragging type noise. This went on for around 30 minutes, but Elaine wasn't going to investigate this time. She stayed in her room until daylight. Telling her friends what she'd experienced, she was surprised to learn that not one of them heard anything. If it was the birds, then surely someone else would have heard them. A month or so later, another guest who was staying in the coachman's quarters also had a strange experience. Paul Abbott was staying in room 4 when he thought he saw a figure through the window in the door. He described the figure as a female, very well dressed but looking like a mirror image. The figure continued past his door, leaving Paul a little confused and puzzled. At 4:30 a.m, he woke up for no apparent reason, but felt his mind and gaze completely transfixed on the corner of the room where the door was. There was no figure there, but what could it have been that had pulled his attention to that very spot once again? Activity doesn't seem to be centered around one or two particular rooms either, because a few years later, a group of friends was staying in the coachman's quarters and experienced numerous strange events. A weird presence was felt by one guest, whilst 2 others felt that whoever or whatever this presence was, it was male, but it didn't seem overly threatening at all. In fact, the guests reported it as being more friendly and curious. They also reported items hidden in room 5 and concluded that this could possibly be tomfoolery up to his usual tricks. A visit to Muncaster Castle is an absolute must if you ever find yourself in the area, and don't be afraid to ask any of the volunteers or members of staff if they've had any experiences. They're always happy to share their stories, and it's a few of these stories which we'll close this episode with. Let's begin with Sandra Duck, who's had several weird and unexplainable experiences. Back in 2004, she was performing her many duties as one of the castle conservators. The Red Corridor is a long passage which is decorated each side with beautiful mahogany wood paneling. It also has a thick, dark red carpet, hence the name. At the best of times, many have said that it's not all that well lit in the daytime, so at night, the place takes on a very different vibe. Yet this incident did indeed take place during the day. Sandra was busy vacuuming that long red carpet when she suddenly felt the unmistakable presence of someone behind her. To add to this already strange and slightly alarming feeling, the area that she was in went from quite hot to very, very cold. Turning around quickly to face whatever it was behind her, Sandra found, you guessed it, nothing. No one. But then the lights in the corridor began to flicker on and off. But not all of the lights, just 2 of them. Wandering off to get help, Sandra brought one of her colleagues back to the Red Corridor to show them what was going on, and sure enough, the lights continued to flicker. They only stopped when the bulbs were physically removed, which didn't make Sandra feel any better. and what she didn't reveal at the time sounded so fantastical that she kept it to herself for a while. She confided in a colleague that she felt that the lights weren't just simply flickering on and off. No, it was as if the light was leaving the bulb itself and travelling over to the other side of the corridor. It would then move back, illuminating the bulb once again, but this was happening extremely quickly. In a completely different area of the castle, Sandra had another strange experience. This time, she was cleaning around the landing area of the Pennington's living quarters when she happened to look up towards Mr. Pennington's office. She clearly saw a figure walk across her field of vision and disappear towards the spiral staircase. Curiosity got the better of Sandra, and she walked down to the office to see who it was. But she found that the door to the spiral staircase was locked from the inside, making it impossible for anyone to have opened the door and used the staircase. Who was this strange phantom figure, and where did they go? Marion Gunn, who was hoovering the first floor landing, may have actually seen the same figure and got a better view of it. Whilst completely engrossed in her work, she noticed movement out of the corner of her eye. Whilst it was only brief, she spotted a figure walking across the corridor at the bottom of the stairs. Marion even had the chance to see that whoever this figure was, it was wearing what looked like a patterned dress. Thinking that it was a member of the public who shouldn't have been in the castle at the time, she quickly set off in pursuit, but found nothing at all. Even upon entering the Great Hall, Marion noticed that the atmosphere was significantly different. It felt charged, uneasy. She has no explanation to this day as to the identity of this figure. Our last story takes place in a location outside the castle, but still within the grounds. Heather was sat near the main castle gate, waiting for the arrival of Peter Frost Pennington. He was due to turn up at any moment to collect some money, so Heather was sat patiently waiting. Everything seemed completely fine, and Heather was quite happily sat there working away and listening to the radio, when from behind her came a huge crashing noise. Jumping to her feet in complete shock, Heather saw that the entirety of a large shelf had collapsed to the floor, leaving cameras, film, and many other items damaged beyond repair. This shelf was well fitted and very strong, and nothing like this had happened before. According to Heather, it's not an experience that she wants to relive anytime soon. And with that, we bid a fond farewell to the beautiful Muncaster Castle, a place which I'll certainly be going back to at some point in the future. And if you haven't already been there yourself, then maybe you should make some time one weekend, because you won't be disappointed. Muncaster is certainly a place of mystery, with its many spirits and its very odd magnetically charged bed frame in the Tapestry Room, which has been scientifically tested and shown to have several very strange anomalies which still defy full explanation. Where did the energy come from in the Tapestry Room? Why have so many people been affected by its properties? Some of the many spirits who call Muncaster home have been identified, but others still remain a mystery, and sightings continue to this very day. It goes without question that Muncaster is definitely a contender to the title of most haunted house in the UK, and there are certainly many areas inside the house from personal experience which definitely do have a strange atmosphere to them. But is this all in the mind? Are we automatically primed to expect to see or hear the paranormal, the supernatural, the strange, the unusual, as soon as we enter the building? Does this expectation of walking into an allegedly haunted house, fully expecting to see something, automatically kick our brains into some sort of fight or flight state? A heightened sensation of awareness and overthinking causing us, as fallible and flawless creatures, to, well, see things that aren't there. During my own personal visit to Muncaster, I spoke to a number of staff members who all had their own stories of strange encounters, unexplained sightings, and feelings of sheer terror and discomfort. But there were just as many who said that they'd never experienced anything at all, with one staff member in particular commenting, quote, "I've never seen a thing, but I'm only a volunteer. Maybe the ghosts only appear to those who are being paid?" End quote. She then smiled at the end of this statement. So it's not as if everyone who works there is towing the party line, so to speak. And for those who haven't seen or witnessed anything unusual, they're still more than happy to point you in the direction of someone who has. So as we draw this episode to a close, have a good think next time you're stuck for somewhere to go. Muncaster's doors will always be open. It's just the question of you being brave enough to cross the threshold. It's Tapestry Room, there, waiting. It's magnetism, waiting to draw you in like a helpless iron filing. And it's walls, waiting to unleash cries from a past long gone. But if you do decide to make that trip just by the lakes, a mile from the coast and right by the river, make sure that you take a notepad and a pen with you, or maybe keep your phone camera permanently switched on and at the ready, because the next person to share an experience, a sighting, a feeling, or even a gut-wrenching sound from Muncaster Castle could be you.